Okay, Matthew 5 through 7. Some notes on this. This is our supplemental lesson. So 5:33 through 37. Do not break your oath. Jesus is not actually prohibiting all vows. He is prohibiting empty, thoughtless oaths, the types of things we might say carelessly or thoughtlessly. And then eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. This is referencing Exodus 21, 24, and Deuteronomy 19, verse 21. So God is actually limiting the amount of revenge. This sounds so counterintuitive to us today. This is one more reason we need to make sure that we are studying the culture and the time period that we're reading the literature of, right? So God is actually limiting the amount of revenge. Legal damages went further. Rabbis taught that if you were wounded someone, you were to compensate for 5 different aspects of damage. Okay, the damage done, the pain, the healing, the loss of time from work, and the insult. So eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It isn't that God is saying if you poke out someone else's eye, they get to poke yours out. It's saying if someone causes you to lose your eye, the furthest amount of damage, revenge you could take would be an eye. You can't kill them. That's what that idea is to limit that. Okay, so then chapter 5, verse 47, even the Gentiles do that. This is not like a drive-by or a swipe at the Gentiles. This is, Jesus is referring to the fact that other nations have not received God's law, right? Or God's revelation, but the Jewish nation had. So they should be living differently. They should be holding themselves to that standard that God has taught them. And this is the same for Christians today. So this absolutely applies to us. Matthew 6, 1 through 4, sounding the trumpets. I thought this was so fun. Okay, so in the temple, there were 13 boxes for alms for your charitable giving, and they were really wide at the bottom and narrow at the top, right? Like a trumpet. Okay, so when you would put your coins in, the sound that they made was very distinct, so you could hear it across the whole temple. And so that was called sounding the trumpets. So Jesus is again using an idiom, using an expression that was already very familiar to the Jewish people. It's just our modern ears that we don't understand. We think that there's people going around the marketplace like trumpeting the fact that they're giving to the poor, but that's not it at all. Not even close. Okay, so if you wanted to boast at this time or call attention to yourself or the fact that you're so charitable in your giving, you would drop as many coins in at once, because then the noise is almost deafening and it's calling everybody's attention to the fact that you're giving charitably. So that was the idea. Don't sound the trumpets before men. Don't call attention to the fact that you are giving. Okay? So Jesus is just reminding us not to call attention to our acts of charity. Okay, moving on, because remember, this is our supplemental lesson, so we're going to talk some more about 6. So Matthew 6, 22 through 23. The eye is the lamp of the body. Having a good eye is called an anyan Torah, means you are generous. Having a bad eye, anyan Rea, means being stingy. Now, guys, that's Hebrew, and I don't know if you know this, but I'm not a Hebrew scholar. Just kidding, that's obvious. I'm doing my best. Those are the closest to the pronunciation as I'm gonna get. But the idea is in a Jewish idiom, again, so this is our third one for this lesson. Again, we have to study the culture, okay? So when you have a good eye, you're generous, and when you have a bad eye, you're stingy. Okay, so that's why this verse follows Jesus talking about not sounding the trumpets. And then chapter 6, verse 30, won't he much more clothe you? This is known in the different Jewish literature, as kal vechomor, which means light and heavy. And I thought this was so fascinating. Okay, so we might think of this as like, if X is true, how much more is Y true? Okay, so like, if God clothes the lilies of the field, how much more will he clothe you? That's, if this is true, then how much more is that true? Okay, and then we're going to move on to Matthew 7, verse 12. The golden rule is reinforced in Leviticus 19, verse 18, and 1 Corinthians 13. Jesus also calls this the second greatest commandment in Mark 12, 28 through 31. So chapter 7, 22 on that day is the day of judgment, and it's Hebrew Yom Hadin. So if we want some more reading on that, I know we've talked about Revelation, so Revelation 20, verses 11 through 15, and some parts of Isaiah and Daniel. And remember what we talked about, if you're struggling with Daniel, one of the best things you can do to understand it is go ahead and read Eugene Peterson's translation in The Message. That explains it all very, very clearly in a way that we can understand, and we can kind of get into the material without being intimidated or thrown by the different uses of all these analogies and all these pictures that kind of might get in the way of us understanding what's really going on in the text. So if you want to get into all that, definitely check out a version of The Message, specifically for when we're doing like Daniel and Revelation, to kind of pull those together in our minds. Okay, Matthew 7, verse 23, get away from me, you workers of lawlessness. Okay, lawlessness is Greek anomia, and it means absence of law or absence of the law, i.e. the Torah. That's one of the worst insults that he could have given to those people who their whole lives revolved around the Torah. So, workers of lawlessness are those who act as if there is no Torah. This reminds me of a C.S. Lewis point on moral law and mere Christianity, when he says we all know right and wrong, what's just and what isn't, whether or not we've studied the Bible. And I just think that's something very important to think about, and that's what I'm going to leave you with today. So thank you for joining me for the supplemental study. I'll see you next time.